Heather's conclusion is that, quote, female students and administrators often exist in a codependent relationship, united by the concepts of victim identity and of trauma.
It's all the women's fault. Oh my God, I can't believe he said it. We're going to take a look at Chris Rufo talking about Heather McDonald's new article, which throws down on those women in universities. Let's see.
She points out that 75% of Ivy League presidents are now female, 66% of college administrators are now female, and 58% of all undergraduates, measured as the students completing a BA degree in recent years, are also female. So you have somewhere along the lines of a ratio of 2-to-1 or higher on average, female to male. And of course, this will have cultural consequences. And Heather's conclusion is that, quote, female students and administrators often exist in a codependent relationship, united by the concepts of victim identity and of trauma. For university females, there is not apparently strength in numbers. The more females' ranks increase, the more we hear about a mass nervous breakdown on campus.
So he is quoting from Heather McDonald. And I love Heather McDonald. She follows the data wherever it goes. And what they're talking about here is the takeover of universities by females. So, if you don't know, under all this fur, I am a female. But facts are facts, okay? So, if you have a demographic shift like this, where basically 2 out of every 3 people who are administrators at colleges are female, then some changes are going to happen. And I don't know about you, but for the last 10, 15 years, campuses have become crazy factories. Now, why can't we draw the conclusion that maybe the females are to blame? Is that possible? Can females ever do anything wrong? I know we love to talk about toxic masculinity. Oh, toxic masculinity is so terrible. But what about toxic femininity? Is that possible? Now, Christopher Rufo is really boring. I'm sorry, the way he talks is sort of boring. But he has some interesting conclusions that are slightly different than Heather McDonald. So let's look into that.
Categorization system. Trait systemization represents rationalism, order, kind of masculine virtues, while trait empathization represents compassion and empathy and feminine virtues. This is not to say that one is good or one is bad.
Do you guys disagree? Comment below. Is it wrong to categorize male and female? Don't you feel that these categorizations are mostly correct? Now, there are always extremes. There are people like myself who I'm probably way more on the male spectrum than the female spectrum. Not a lot of, empathy or emotions coming out of me. But comment below if you guys agree or if you believe this is wrong to categorize male and female like this.
Mankind must have both sets of virtues. Mankind must have them in some kind of balance. And when they get out of balance, you start to see social and interpersonal and individual problems. So there are cultures and institutions that have an imbalance toward trait systemization. They are too masculine, too punitive, too restrictive, too authoritarian. And then you have, in other institutions, an imbalance toward trait empathization. They are too permissive, they are too coddling, they are too compassionate in a way that then becomes pathological.
Once again, is he wrong? Is it possible to have a system that's too empathetic? I still remember when I first heard stories coming out of K through 12 where they stopped giving failing grades, where they stopped using red pens because that would hurt children. They're getting rid of valedictorians because, hey, that's somebody winning and then other people are losing and then people feel bad. How about sports teams? Everybody gets a medal. We don't keep score. This is a major problem. And it's a major problem for females because we need strong influences in our life. The reason why I am the way I am today is because of male figures, it's because of sports, it's because of learning at a young age. You win and you lose, and you learn how to lose. You learn how to lose with grace. But if you don't have those things, it's bad for the women, but you know who it's really bad for? The boys. And there's been books after books after books of men falling behind. And why are they falling behind? Well, for K through 12, we are basically making it into feminization you. You can't play kickball. You can't stick up for stick up to a bully. We don't care who started it. If you hit him, then you're suspended. Well, no. When I was young, it would always be the first question, who started it? Why did you hit him? Was he picking on a younger kid? Was he picking on a different kid? Yeah? Is that why you hit him? Well, good. Then you deserve to be hit. That is the feminization of education.
Are making the argument that our institutions, in this case, the university system, has become too overloaded toward trait empathization. And that when you have the virtue of compassion, which is of course good in and of itself, it can actually become pathological and actually have unintended negative consequences if it's not balanced with a sense of the systemization or a sense of order and hierarchy and competition and more masculine virtues. And I've noticed that what we have, in a sense, is a university as a therapeutic institution. The culture is not oriented towards the production of knowledge, towards merit, which is competitive and hierarchical, but now towards a system based on personal identity and based on a model of therapeutic. So that the university as a place for personal exploration, as a place to heal from trauma and dysregulation, as a place that provides a therapeutic environment rather than a competitive and knowledge-seeking environment.
Isn't that true? I think it is. You see videos from college campuses now, and it's all about me, 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 me. Me, 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 me. My feelings. I feel hurt. You're oppressing me. Oh, I'm hurt. You're hurting my feelings. When I was young, they would say, yeah, so what? You're an adult. If you can't deal with it, go home to mommy. That's what needs to start happening. Now, this is going to get really deep. He really goes into some deep stuff here, but I think he might be right.
The modern university, I think, first, can be characterized as having adopted left-wing victim narratives, not on the axis of economics or race, although certainly those are there, but on the axis of the therapeutic and the psychological. An attribute that I've noticed is that individual pathology is valorized as a form of marginalized identity. And so when you have this victim narrative along a psychological line, all of a sudden, individual psychopathologies, individual traumas, individual problems, individual personality disorders, something even like obesity, a kind of physical disorder or dysregulation, is elevated into the marginalized identity that provides the moral center of these victim narratives.
Is this all making sense to you? I think this is super profound. We've all talked about it, the snowflake generation. First, you make people victims. Nothing is their fault. Everything is the fault of someone else. Well, now they take it even a step further. So what he's talking about here is every little quirk or difference that you have that's maybe outside the norm or outside of the average is pathologized. And there's a lot more that he goes into. So I'm going to put the link below. Please watch it all and like his channel because he's got some really profound things. He's just kind of boring. Sorry. Sorry, Chris, I love you, but you're kind of boring. Moderate your tone just a little bit. Okay. Now he's going to talk about what this creates. What are we creating?
The third point that I think is important is when you take the victim narrative based on psychology, you elevate individual pathology into a form of marginalized identity, you create a social system that incentivizes certain kinds of behaviors. I think actually in some ways, if you look at the DSM-5 criteria for borderline personality disorder and you take them as a metaphor for a social process, you're actually incentivizing many of those traits. You're incentivizing emotional lability or kind of emotional displays. You're incentivizing, in some ways, a kind of paranoid relationship between individual and society. Fourth, how does this express itself in an institutional setting? Well, it expresses itself through bureaucracy. In my reporting recently on public universities in the state of Florida, I've been really flabbergasted. You know the story about the increase in administration, the increase in bureaucracy as a statistical matter. You have, I think, somewhere almost now more than 1 million college administrators in the United States. It's a huge number of people. But if you actually break it down into its component parts, you see something very interesting. You see massive counseling centers that are based on left-wing therapeutic ideologies. You have these cultural centers that are divvied up by race, but have absorbed victim narratives on a psychological axis. You have, so-called queer spaces, and then you have massive DEI departments that are both standalone academic or standalone administrative departments and also embedded units or task forces or committees within all of the academic departments.
So you are creating crazy people. Let's take out the academies, Chris. They are creating crazy people. You are incentivizing people for displays of emotion, for being oppressed, for being victimized. It gives you social credit. And beyond that, there are tons of money. There's tons of money in the victimhood narrative because you have to have DEI departments. You've got to have equity and inclusion. You got to look after the oppressed. You got to have counselors for all those people who they heard a bad word. Someone said, "God bless America," and they are completely offended now, and they need a counseling session. And they need to watch puppies on the screen and have stuffed animals so that they can hug. We are infantilizing an entire generation. And I agree with Chris. Is it the fault of women? I do believe this. I do. Because feminism has destroyed women. In my generation, we were told you got to be tough and you got to be tougher than all those guys out there because they want your job. They're not going to just hand you a job. You got to tough it out. Now we're telling women that men are mean. They say mean things and they hurt your feelings. So you got to go complain to the boss. We are creating victims. And then we're creating a class of people who have to protect those victims. And then we're creating a class who points the victims in the direction of all the people they're supposed to blame. You will never succeed. We are creating babies. Okay, guys, that's it for me here. Please subscribe, comment, like. Let's share this. Please go watch Chris's video. I'll see you on the next one.